The wind howled across the dry New Mexico plains, carrying with it the dust of broken promises and the whispers of a frightened town. The year was 1872, and in the small settlement of Silver Creek, a girl named Clara Evans, just 19, stood before the town's courthouse, trembling in a faded white dress that wasn't her own. Her father, Henry Evans, a bankrupt rancher desperate to save what little land he had left, had made an arrangement, not with another rancher or merchant, but with a man the town feared. Kaya, a tall, stoic Apache warrior. The townspeople gathered like vultures, whispering in judgment. "She's being sold," one woman hissed. "To a savage," another spat. But no one dared say it too loud because Kaya was there, standing tall, his copper skin glinting under the sun, his dark hair tied in a single braid, eyes like carved obsidian that saw everything and revealed nothing. He didn't look at the crowd, only at Clara. She tried to look away, but there was something in his gaze that felt strangely steady, not cruel, just resolute. Clara had never spoken to him before this moment. She'd only seen him twice, once when he came to Silver Creek to trade pelts and once when he helped her little brother after a wagon accident. Back then she'd thought him silent but kind. Now he was her husband-to-be, and her heart thrashed like a caged bird. The marriage was not of love but of debt. Clara's father owed the Apache band for grazing cattle on their land and for burning their sacred canyon by accident. To prevent bloodshed, the tribal elder had offered a peace solution, a symbolic union between families. Kaya had volunteered, claiming it would end the blood before it begins. Clara didn't understand why a proud warrior would agree to marry a frightened white girl until much later. The justice of the peace mumbled through the vows, his hands shaking. No one clapped when it ended. No one smiled. Clara's father avoided her eyes. Kaya said nothing, only turned and offered his hand. She hesitated, then placed hers in his, rough and warm like a man who had lived close to the earth. Without another word, he led her to his horse. He lifted her gently with surprising care, then mounted behind her and rode away from the town that had already begun to whisper her name in disgrace. The journey into the Apache lands was silent. The desert stretched endlessly, painted gold and crimson under the setting sun. Clara's heart pounded with fear and confusion. What would he do to her? Would he force her? Would she ever see her family again? When she dared to glance back, Silver Creek was already gone, swallowed by the horizon. That night, they camped near a riverbed. Kaya built a fire and offered her dried meat and cornmeal cakes. She couldn't eat. Her eyes brimmed with tears. He watched quietly, then said in low English, "You are safe." His voice was deep, patient. She didn't believe him. She wrapped her arms around herself, whispering, "Why me?" Kaya looked at the flames for a long time before answering, "Because they would not stop fighting. Someone had to stop it. I chose peace." The stars stretched above them, endless and cold. When she shivered, he took off his blanket and handed it to her without a word. It smelled of smoke and cedar. He slept a few feet away, his back to her, his hand always near his knife, not as a threat but as habit. Clara lay awake, thinking of her old life, the smell of her mother's bread, the small church bells on Sunday, the feeling of safety that now seemed like a dream. But beneath her fear, a small confusing thought flickered. This man hadn't touched her roughly or spoken to her cruelly. He'd only done what he thought was right. By morning they rode deeper into Apache country, cliffs of red stone, winding canyons, and the distant echo of drums. She met his people that afternoon, faces painted, eyes wary. Some women looked at her with pity, others with resentment. A small boy ran to Kaya, shouting, "Teyo," meaning brother. Kaya lifted him easily, his face softening for the first time. It was then that Clara realized he wasn't just a warrior. He was a protector, perhaps even a leader among them. That night, they reached the lodge that would be their home, a round, well-built hut near the edge of a stream. It was modest but clean, decorated with feathers and carved stones. He pointed to the doorway and said, "You're home now." The word home felt foreign in her chest. When she didn't move, he said softly, "You may leave tomorrow if you wish. I will not stop you." Her eyes widened. "You'd let me go?" she asked. He nodded. A forced bond is no bond. She didn't sleep much that night. The desert wind carried the sound of distant chanting. The stars glimmered above the smoke hole in the roof. She watched Kaya sitting outside, sharpening his knife, the firelight dancing on his face. For the first time, she saw him not as a captor but as a man, one bound by honor, not cruelty. In the morning, Clara walked to the edge of the stream, her reflection rippling in the clear water. She could run. She could try to return to Silver Creek. But the memory of the town's cold eyes stopped her. They had given her away to save themselves. There was nothing for her there anymore. When she turned, Kaya was watching her, not to stop her, but to see what she would choose. She realized then that her freedom was real. And somehow that freedom made her stay. She walked back toward him and said quietly, "I'll stay, for now." Kaya only nodded once, but his eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes, seemed to hold a hint of respect. It was the first fragile thread between them, thin as spider silk but strong enough to change the course of both their lives. The days after the marriage passed like a dream Clara could not wake from. Not quite a nightmare, not yet a home. The Apache camp lay hidden among the red cliffs, surrounded by mesquite and whispering streams that shimmered under the desert sun. For the first time in her life, she woke to the sounds of drums and birds instead of church bells. The people moved with quiet grace, their lives woven into the rhythm of the earth. At first, no one spoke to her. The women turned their faces away when she passed, their eyes filled with questions. She heard their whispers, the white girl, the peace wife, the outsider. Only the children were curious. They followed her as she fetched water, giggling, pointing at her pale skin and golden hair. It was both humiliating and oddly endearing. Kaya didn't speak much either. He was gone most mornings, leaving before the first light, returning at dusk with wild herbs or meat. When he came back, he'd silently place food on the fire and divide it between them. He never demanded thanks, never asked questions. His presence was quiet but solid, a man who had learned patience from the wind itself. Clara, meanwhile, fought her confusion. She had expected anger, domination, or indifference, all the things she'd been warned about. Instead, she found gentleness wrapped in silence. Kaya gave her space, but also small signs of care, leaving water near her bedroll before dawn, bringing her a shawl when the desert cold seeped through the lodge walls. Yet, the loneliness was sharp. The desert night stretched endlessly. Sometimes she'd cry softly, hiding her face in the blanket he'd given her. Once she thought he hadn't noticed. But the next morning she found a tiny bundle of wild desert roses laid beside her, pink and delicate, their fragrance faint but sweet. No note, no words, only that simple offering. That day marked the beginning of something fragile between them. She began to watch him differently. When he was among his people, Kaya's quietness turned into command. Men listened when he spoke, and elders nodded in respect. She learned he was not just a warrior. He was a peacekeeper, a man who had convinced his tribe to choose treaties over vengeance after years of bloodshed. His scars were not only from battle but from loss. A brother killed by ranchers, a mother taken by illness. Clara started to learn the Apache way of life, how to grind corn, how to weave fibers into rope, how to recognize healing herbs. A woman named Nayla, older and kind, took pity on her and taught her words: Usin God, Ashke, boy, she, my. The language felt strange but warm on her tongue. One afternoon, as they sat weaving baskets near the stream, Nayla told her softly, "Kaya chose you to save both sides. He carries heavy ghosts. You remind him that peace is possible." Clara didn't understand then, but she felt her heart twist at the thought that her presence, unwanted as it had been, might mean something more than humiliation. Still, she longed to know what Kaya truly thought. One evening, while he was repairing a spear, she finally gathered courage. "Do you hate me?" she asked quietly. He looked up slowly, his hands still. "Hate?" he repeated, as if tasting the word. "No. You came from the ones who burned our canyon, but you did not hold the fire. I hate only fire, not its shadow." She blinked, not sure whether to be comforted or ashamed. After a long silence, she whispered, "I didn't choose this marriage." He nodded once. "Neither did I. But perhaps we both can choose what happens after." That night, when the wind grew cold, he added more wood to the fire and gestured for her to sit closer. She hesitated and then moved nearer. The warmth spread between them like something living. For the first time, she saw him smile. faint and fleeting but enough to make her breath catch. In the following days they began to share small conversations. She asked about the stars. He told her how each one was a spirit watching over the earth. She spoke of the town, how people feared what they did not understand. He listened quietly, sometimes asking questions, his English broken but thoughtful. Their bond grew not through grand gestures but through quiet acts. He taught her to ride a barebacked horse. She mended a tear in his shirt. They laughed once when a goat stole their bread, but Silver Creek had not forgotten her. One evening, a group of white traders arrived near the Apache camp under a flag of truce. Clara hid behind the lodge, her heart racing. Through the crack in the wall, she saw one of them, Sheriff Boone, the same man who had overseen her forced marriage. His voice was oily with contempt. "We're keeping the peace, but tell your people to stay clear of the riverlands. That white girl," he spat. "She's not one of you." Kaya's posture stiffened, but his reply was calm. "She is my wife. That is enough." When they left, Clara approached him. "You could have told them I'm not truly your wife," she said softly. He met her eyes, dark, unreadable. "You are," he said. "Not because of the paper, but because of how you stay." Her breath caught. For the first time, she realized she no longer wanted to run. The desert had changed her, stripped away her fears, left her raw and uncertain, but stronger. That night, she sat outside watching the stars. Kaya joined her, sitting close enough for their shoulders to brush. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was gentle. She whispered, "Do you think peace can last between our people?" He looked toward the horizon. "Peace lasts only if someone is brave enough to begin it. Maybe that is our work now." She didn't answer. She only leaned her head slightly against his shoulder. He didn't move away. In that moment, under the vast, unending sky, something shifted quietly between them. Not love yet, but the beginning of it. Rooted deep like a seed in desert soil. And though Clara didn't know it, Kaya was already preparing something, or a secret gift. Carved from pain and devotion, one that would soon silence every voice that had once mocked their union. The winter winds crept over the desert, dusting the cliffs with pale frost. In the Apache camp, life slowed but never stopped. Fires burned brighter, stories grew longer, and bonds deepened beneath the cold stars. Clara had been there for nearly 3 months, and though she still missed the smells of bread and pine back in Silver Creek, she no longer counted the days. She had learned the rhythm of this place, the mornings filled with grinding corn and laughter of children, the afternoons spent fetching water or sewing hides, the evenings warmed by fire and song. Her skin had browned under the sun, her hands roughened, her heart stronger, and in that strength she found something unexpected, peace. But something else stirred too. It was in the quiet way Kaya's gaze lingered when she braided her hair, the unspoken warmth when their hands brushed while passing food. It was in how his voice softened when he said her name, Clara, rolling the syllables carefully as if each one mattered. Yet Kaya remained mysterious, his emotions guarded, his thoughts buried deep. One dawn, Clara woke to find him gone again, leaving only his horse tracks vanishing toward the canyon lands. When she asked Nayla where he went, the woman only smiled and said, "He works for you." "For me?" Clara frowned. What could he be doing? Nayla's only answer was, "The best men carve love from silence." Days passed and Kaya's absences grew longer. When he returned, he carried small bundles wrapped in cloth, wood chips, colored stones, pieces of silver ore. He hid them carefully in a chest near the back of the lodge. Clara tried not to pry, but curiosity tugged at her. One night when he was asleep, she peeked inside. She found delicate carvings, figures of eagles, women, and sons, each shaped from rare stone and inlaid with shimmering metal. The detail was breathtaking. When Kaya awoke, she expected anger, but he only said softly, "It is not ready yet." "What is it?" she asked. "A gift," he replied, "for those who took you." The words confused her. "For the town?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded once, eyes unreadable. "They think I took a bride from fear. I will show them what peace looks like." She didn't understand, but she could feel his conviction like heat in the room. As days passed, he began to teach her his craft. He showed her how to carve lines that followed the grain of the wood, how to polish stone until it glowed like moonlight. Working beside him, she learned patience. the way silence could say more than words, how creation itself could heal. Sometimes they worked for hours without speaking, only sharing glances, their breathing falling into rhythm. It was during one of those afternoons, as sunlight spilled through the cracks of the lodge, that Clara realized she was no longer afraid of him. In his stillness, she found steadiness, in his strength, safety, and in his quiet eyes, something she dared to hope was affection, but the outside world was not so kind. News came from a passing trader that Silver Creek had grown restless again. Ranchers accused the Apache of stealing cattle, and soldiers were rumored to be marching from Fort Stanton. Fear spread quickly through the camp. Some of Kaya's people wanted to move deeper into the mountains. Others whispered that the peace treaty would not hold. That night, Kaya stood by the fire, his face carved from shadow and flame. "They will come," he said to the elders. "And when they do, they must see something greater than fear. Something they cannot destroy." The elders nodded grimly. Clara didn't know what he meant, but she felt the storm gathering in the air, the kind that breaks both hearts and history. The next morning, Kaya took her to the canyon, the one the settlers had burned years ago. What had once been blackened was now slowly healing. Small flowers grew between the stones. Water glistened from melted frost. There, in the heart of the canyon, stood a half-built monument, carved into the stone wall. Clara gasped. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Part sculpture, part shrine. Figures of Apache and settlers were carved side by side, hands joined under a rising sun. In the center, unfinished but already beautiful, was a likeness of her, her face tilted upward, eyes open to the sky. She turned to Kaya, speechless. "It is for you," he said quietly. "For your courage, for the peace you did not ask for but chose to stay and protect." Tears welled in her eyes. "But why show it to them?" she whispered. "Because they need to see what they tried to destroy. You are proof that peace can grow from ashes." In that moment, Clara saw him differently, not as the quiet husband forced upon her, but as a man carrying a vision far greater than vengeance. His gift wasn't just for her, it was a message to the world. Over the following weeks, they worked together to finish the monument. She mixed clay for the base while he chiseled with unyielding precision. Her laughter began to return. Sometimes they teased each other in broken English and Apache words. Once, when she stumbled on the rocks, he caught her, his hands firm on her waist. For a moment they froze, the desert wind swirling around them, their hearts racing. Then, slowly, he let go, his eyes lingering just a second too long. That night, the stars seemed to burn brighter than ever. Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the lodge. She thought of Silver Creek, of the hatred and fear that had sent her here. But then she thought of Kaya's steady hands, his patience, his gift. For the first time, she didn't feel like a victim of fate. She felt chosen, but peace was fragile. One cold morning, the sound of hooves thundered through the canyon. Soldiers, a dozen of them, rode into camp, led by Sheriff Boone. Clara froze when she saw his face twisted with arrogance. "We're here to bring her back," he barked. "The girl's been kidnapped long enough." Kaya stepped forward calmly. "She is free. Ask her." All eyes turned to her. The air was sharp with tension. For a heartbeat, Clara felt the weight of both worlds pressing down on her. The town that had betrayed her, and the man who had shown her compassion. Then she lifted her chin. "I'm not leaving." Boone's face went red. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes," she said clearly, her voice steady as a mountain. "I do." The camp fell silent. Kaya's jaw clenched, but his eyes softened, proud, maybe even relieved. Boone snarled and ordered the men to stand down, but his glare promised trouble. When they left, Clara turned to Kaya. Her hand shook. "They'll come back," he nodded. "Yes, that is why the gift must be finished." She reached for his hand. "Then we'll finish it together." And for the first time, he didn't pull away. His fingers closed gently around hers, and the world, for that small moment, felt whole. The days that followed the soldier's visit felt heavy with silence. The Apache camp went about its life as though nothing had changed, but the air was tense. Every rustle in the brush, every echo down the canyon made Clara's heart jump. She knew Sheriff Boone would return, and next time, he wouldn't bring only words. Kaya seemed to sense it too. He trained with his men at dawn, checking weapons, teaching them defensive positions along the ridge. But when he came home to the lodge, he never brought fear with him. only calm. Fear, he told her once, feeds the fire before it burns. We must not feed it. Still, Clara could not shake her unease. She had seen what Boone was capable of. He didn't see her as a person anymore. She was proof that his town's pride had been wounded. And men like him, she knew, would rather burn peace than accept it. To distract herself, she worked harder on the monument. Her hands became raw from carrying water and smoothing clay, but the pain steadied her. Kaya worked beside her, often in silence, sometimes humming low songs that sounded older than the earth. The carving was nearly finished now. 2 figures joined beneath the sun, their hands reaching toward one another, light streaming between them. One evening, as the last rays of daylight painted the canyon walls in gold, Kaya handed her a small pendant carved from turquoise. For you, he said simply. She turned it in her palm, a small, perfect sunburst. It's beautiful, she whispered. It is a promise, he said. Whatever happens, remember the light. She wanted to ask what he meant, but his expression stopped her. Calm, yes, but touched by sadness, as though he already knew the storm that was coming. That night, she dreamed of fire, flames devouring the canyon, her name shouted from the smoke. When she woke, the sky was gray, the air heavy. The drums in camp had gone silent. At midday it happened. The riders came again, Boone at their head, this time with 20 men, rifles gleaming. Dust billowed behind them as they stormed into the camp. Clara was fetching water when the first gunshot cracked through the air. Inside, Kaya shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the lodge. Panic erupted around them. Women gathering children, men readying bows and rifles. But Kaya raised his hand, calling out to his people in Apache, his voice steady. No fighting. Not unless they strike first. Boone rode forward, his voice booming. Step aside, Kaya. We're taking the girl and ending this madness. Kaya stood his ground. You will not take what is not yours, Boone sneered. You think building a rock statue changes anything? You think peace comes from pretending we're equals? He spat at the ground. You're nothing but... Clara stepped forward before he could finish. Stop, she cried. You don't understand what he's trying to do. Boone turned to her, eyes cold. You're confused, girl. He's got you bewitched. I'm not bewitched, she said, voice shaking but clear. I'm awake. You're the one who's blind. The words seemed to sting worse than a bullet. Boone's hand shot up, signaling his men. Burn it, he snapped. Burn it all. The soldiers hesitated, some uneasy, but a few followed orders. They hurled torches toward the canyon where the monument stood. Flames licked the dry brush, spreading fast. Clara screamed and tried to run toward it, but Kaya caught her, pulling her back. No, he said. You'll die there. I can't let them destroy it. She cried, struggling. He looked at her, then at the fire consuming their dream. Then we go together. He seized a blanket, drenched it in water, and threw it around her shoulders. Then side by side they raced into the canyon. Smoke burned her lungs, heat seared her face, but she didn't stop. The monument loomed through the haze, still standing, though embers climbed its base. Kaya grabbed a fallen branch and beat back the flames while Clara poured water from a clay jar. Sparks exploded around them, but they fought as one, coughing, gasping, refusing to surrender. The wind howled like the spirits themselves were watching. Then through the smoke she heard Boone shouting. Let them burn. They chose this. Her vision blurred. For a heartbeat she thought she might collapse, until she felt Kaya's hand steady her. Look, he whispered. Through the smoke she saw them, townsfolk from Silver Creek drawn by the fire arriving on horseback. Men, women, even children. They stared, transfixed at what Kaya had built, the great figures in the rock, half-charred but still standing, their joined hands gleaming in the firelight, and there, carved in the heart of the stone, was her face serene, eyes lifted toward the dawn. The sight silenced everyone. For a moment, even Boone faltered. What is this? He muttered. Kaya turned to him, his voice hoarse but powerful. It is what you tried to kill, peace. You can burn the earth but not the meaning carved into it. The words struck like thunder. No one moved. No one spoke. The soldiers lowered their guns one by one. The fire's roar faded into the crackle of dying embers. Clara's knees buckled, exhaustion flooding her. Kaya caught her before she fell. Around them, the canyon glowed orange and red, like a heartbeat still pulsing in stone. When the smoke cleared, Boone's men retreated, not from fear, but from shame. The townspeople followed, silent, unable to speak against what they had witnessed. Boone glared one last time, but even he said nothing. The fire he had ordered could not burn what the world now saw. Not savagery, but beauty. Later, as dawn spread across the desert, Clara and Kaya stood before the half-burned monument. The air smelled of smoke and rebirth. She reached for his hand. "You saved it," she whispered. He shook his head. "We saved it together." Her throat tightened. "Do you think they understood?" He looked toward the horizon where Silver Creek shimmered faintly in the distance. "Maybe not yet, but one day." And then, almost shyly, he added, "You are stronger than the fire, Clara." She met his eyes, her heart aching in a way that was not pain but something deeper, a pull she could no longer deny. She stepped closer, her hand still in his. "Only because you showed me how." For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them was silent except for the whisper of the wind through the canyon, a soft, eternal sound that seemed to bless what had survived. That night, as the camp rebuilt and the children danced again near the fire, Clara and Kaya sat side by side outside their lodge. The stars were bright, the same as the night they had first met. He touched the turquoise pendant still hanging around her neck. "It kept its promise," he said quietly. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "So did you." And though neither said the words aloud, something unspoken passed between them, not forced, not bound by treaty or duty, but freely given. The kind of love born from ashes, shaped by courage and sealed in fire. Weeks passed after the fire, and the canyon slowly healed. The monument, though scarred by smoke, still stood strong, the carved figures half burned, half glowing, as if forged by the very flames that tried to destroy them. To Clara, it looked more beautiful than before. The blackened edges gave it depth. The cracks told the story of survival. Every mark whispered, "We endured." The people of Silver Creek did not return immediately, but word spread fast. Traders carried stories of what they'd seen, how an Apache warrior and a white woman fought side by side to save a monument built not for war, but for peace. Some called it a miracle, others called it madness, but no one could deny what they felt when they saw it. Kaya's people began to rebuild without fear. The elders spoke of new beginnings, and even those who once doubted Clara began to greet her warmly. She helped tend the sick, taught children a few English words, and learned to laugh again. Her heart, which had once been a frightened bird, now rested easily in her chest. But one morning Kaya told her they must return to Silver Creek. Clara froze. "You want to go back?" He nodded. "The town needs to see what they built, not what they burned." Fear returned to her eyes. "They'll hate us." He looked at her gently. "Maybe. But they cannot unsee the truth." So together they rode, through the red canyons, across the open plains, the sun at their backs. As they neared Silver Creek, the familiar sights came into view. The church steeple, the rows of wooden houses, the dry well in the square. But everything felt smaller now, weaker somehow. The place that once ruled her fate now seemed fragile against the vastness she had come to know. When they entered the town, whispers rippled through the streets. Faces appeared in windows. Children hid behind fences. Some gasped. Others glared. The blacksmith stopped his hammer mid-swing. The preacher's wife dropped her basket of apples. And then from the saloon came Sheriff Boone. His arm was bandaged, his face drawn tight with bitterness. "Well," he said coldly, "the prodigal bride returns." Kaya said nothing, his gaze steady. Clara's heart pounded, but she held her head high. "We didn't come for you," she said. "We came to deliver a gift," he sneered. "A gift? After what you've done to this town?" She smiled faintly. "You mean after what you did to yourself?" Boone stepped closer, but before he could speak again, Kaya untied a cloth bundle from his horse and opened it in the center of the square. Inside lay a miniature replica of the monument, carved from stone and turquoise, its figures no taller than a man's arm. Even in miniature, it was exquisite. The Apache and settler joined beneath the rising sun, hands clasped, the word peace etched in both English and Apache. Gasps filled the square. The preacher approached, hat in hand. "You made this?" Kaya nodded once. "It is for Silver Creek, so you remember what you almost lost." Boone laughed, harsh and cruel. "We don't need your trinkets." But then little Eli, the blacksmith's boy, stepped forward. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Can I touch it?" Kaya nodded again, and the boy knelt beside the sculpture, running his fingers along the smooth lines. "It's warm," he said in wonder. Something in that simple moment broke the spell of hatred that hung over the crowd. The preacher's wife began to cry softly. The blacksmith muttered, "Lord, forgive us." Boone scowled, but the tide had turned. The townspeople surrounded the sculpture, their faces filled with awe and shame. One woman said quietly, "He built this for us." Clara's eyes glistened. "For all of us," she said. "So we remember that peace doesn't come from blood. It comes from choice." The preacher stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Where should it stand?" Kaya looked around the square, his gaze landing on the old courthouse steps, the same place Clara had been forced to marry him. "Here," he said. "Let it stand where fear once stood." The crowd parted. Slowly, reverently, the men lifted the monument and set it before the courthouse. The turquoise caught the sunlight, scattering it into tiny sparks that danced across the dirt street. It looked as if the sun itself had blessed it. Boone stood motionless, his jaw clenched. For a long moment, it seemed he might order it torn down. But when he met Kaya's eyes, something there, calm, unyielding, made him falter. He turned away, muttering, "Do as you please." And then he walked off, his shadow shrinking behind him. Silence hung over the square. Then slowly the townspeople began to applaud, hesitant at first, then louder until it filled the air like thunder rolling across the plains. Clara's breath caught as she looked at Kaya, who stood as still as stone, his eyes reflecting the light of his creation. That evening, the whole town gathered as the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in memory, Silver Creek and the Apache stood together. No rifles, no shouting, only quiet understanding. The preacher raised his hands. "Let this monument remind us that peace can grow even from fire." When the crowd dispersed, Clara and Kaya remained. The twilight painted the town in gold and blue. She turned to him, her heart full. "You silenced them," she said softly. He tilted his head. "No, the truth did." She smiled, tears glimmering in her lashes. "Still, it was your hands that carved it." He looked at her for a long moment, then reached out and touched the turquoise pendant at her throat. "And yours that kept it alive." The air between them shimmered with warmth, not the nervous tension of strangers, but the deep peace of souls that had fought, bled, and healed together. Slowly she stepped closer, resting her hand against his chest. He placed his hand over hers. The sun sank behind the ridge and the sky blazed crimson, the color of fire, of forgiveness, of love reborn. That night, they rode back toward the canyon. The stars were bright and the wind whispered through the sage. When they reached their lodge, the desert stretched before them, vast, endless, and alive. Clara turned to him, her voice a whisper. "Do you think they'll ever truly understand?" He smiled faintly. "Understanding takes time. But peace begins now." And as she leaned against him beneath the boundless sky, she realized that her life, once traded away by fear, had become something sacred. Not a tragedy, not a duty, but a story of redemption carved in stone and love stronger than the flames that tried to destroy it. The monument in Silver Creek would stand for generations, untouched, its turquoise eyes forever reflecting the light of the sun. And the people who passed it would whisper the story of the girl who was forced to marry an Apache, and the wedding gift that silenced the whole town.